Have you ever felt a strange kind of weight pressing down on your chest, even when your life appears to be moving along just fine? There's no immediate crisis, no external problem to solve, yet something inside feels off, dull, depleted, as if the spark that once kept you animated has gone dim. You sleep a full 8 hours, maybe more, but wake up without freshness, without that sense of having truly rested. The coffee helps, maybe, but it doesn't restore you. What if this exhaustion isn't about muscle strain or lack of sleep? What if this isn't your body crying out, but your spirit whispering, quietly unraveling beneath the surface? See, we often think of tiredness as something rooted in the physical, a body pushed too far, a diet lacking nutrients, or a mind overloaded with stress. But there's a more subtle dimension, a realm that doesn't register on fitness trackers or medical charts. It's the terrain of spiritual energy. This essence, known by many names across cultures, whether it's chi, prana, or spirit breath, is the quiet pulse behind your thoughts, your heartbeat, your very being. And when that essence begins to scatter, it doesn't make a sound, but it leaves behind an unmistakable hollowness. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a slow fade, a disinterest in the things that once thrilled you, a hazy disconnection from conversations, a sense that even your joys feel muted. The truth is, your spiritual reserves may be leaking, tiny fractures you can't see, tiny portals bleeding your vitality moment by moment. These leaks don't come with alarms. They don't scream or draw attention, but over time, they drain you more thoroughly than a hard day's labor ever could. This isn't about mystical superstition. It's about the invisible structure that holds your inner life together. Surrounding every person is a field, a soft electric hum of energy that some traditions call the subtle body or energy sheath. It mirrors the shape of the physical form, but its role is protective. When it's whole, it holds your essence tightly, like a jar with a lid. But when it's torn through trauma, fear, or unresolved pain, that essence starts to slip away. You don't see it, but you feel it. You feel it when you try to focus, but your thoughts drift like smoke. You feel it when you smile, but the joy doesn't reach your heart. What causes these rips in the first place? More than most realize, it's often deep emotional ruptures, a betrayal that shattered your trust, a moment of grief that silenced your laughter, events that carved into you not with physical injury but with a sharp emotional edge. You may have moved on intellectually, but your energy body remembers. It holds on to the moment like a photograph suspended in time, and every second that photo remains active, your spirit continues to pour itself into it, not intentionally, but constantly. Then there are the silent promises we make, ones even our conscious minds forget. In moments of pain, we might swear to never open our hearts again, never trust another soul, never speak our truth. And while those vows may feel like strength in the moment, they become chains around your energy centers. They don't protect you. They restrict you. Over time, these invisible contracts start to limit the flow of energy, especially through the heart, the voice, and the will. You might not remember making the promise, but its effects will show in your tiredness, your hesitation, your chronic sense of emotional shutdown. Interwoven with those vows are unseen cords, energetic threads that bind us to people, places, or even memories. When connections are loving and balanced, these cords serve as bridges. But when the ties become one-sided, controlling, or unresolved, the cord turns into a siphon. Energy bleeds not just in moments of contact, but constantly. Even when the person is long gone, even when you haven't spoken in years. These cords don't respect time. They don't disappear unless you consciously release them. And until you do, they pull from you like an open valve left untended. Some cords stretch across more than this lifetime. Some extend into dimensions of existence most people never consciously touch. These are spiritual agreements, deals made in forgotten dreams, in lifetimes lived before this one, in states of consciousness altered by trauma or divine encounter. A promise to always protect someone, to take on another's pain, to sacrifice yourself for a higher cause. Such vows might have felt noble when made, but they don't always age well. Over time, they become outdated programs still running, still demanding energy even when they no longer serve your growth. And because they operate beneath awareness, they're incredibly difficult to identify, let alone undo. There's an even more subtle layer to this system of energetic depletion, and it hides behind masks of light. In the spiritual community, people often speak of guides, higher beings, and benevolent entities offering wisdom, healing, and protection. And many such connections are indeed benevolent. But not all. Some so-called beings of light are anything but. They appear kind. They speak in comforting tones. They may offer visions, feelings of peace, or even miraculous insights. But the price they demand is subtle bondage. These are entities that thrive on being needed. They don't just want your attention, they want access to your will. They form energetic contracts cloaked in sacred language, creating dependency under the guise of spiritual partnership. You believe you've found a helper, but over time, you notice that your own power wanes, your decisions feel less free, and your energy doesn't fully return after your meditations or rituals. These aren't companions. They are parasites with halos, and the longer the agreement stands, the more your essence slips into their domain. This form of energy theft is insidious because it wraps itself in beauty, but the results speak louder than the promises. You feel depleted after seeking light. You become spiritually exhausted despite constant spiritual practice. That's not guidance, that's bondage, wearing a robe of transcendence. Then there's what lives even closer to us than other people or spirits, what clings to our own energetic skin. Astral parasites and psychic residue don't need an invitation. They feed on what you forget to release. That sadness you swallowed but never expressed. That resentment you buried beneath your smile. That fear you refused to admit aloud. All of it remains, hovering in your field, creating the perfect breeding ground for subtle invaders. These parasites don't scream. They drain in silence. They are not ghouls or monsters. They're shadows that learned how to breathe. And then there's the residue, the emotional dust left behind from tense conversations, painful memories, even doom scrolling through a feed filled with fear. It builds, slowly, layer upon layer, until your once bright aura starts to dim like a fogged-up mirror. You find yourself dreading certain rooms, certain people, certain hours of the day. You don't know why. You just know you leave feeling worse than when you arrived. None of these things operate in isolation. They weave together. They build on one another. And they stay quiet, hidden from the part of you that's always busy fixing what can be seen. That's why people so often treat fatigue as something to be cured with vitamins or yoga or more rest. But what do you do when the tiredness doesn't leave? When rest makes no difference? When every effort to recharge ends in more emptiness? That's when you must begin to look inward, not just to the mind, but to the soul. Not just to your habits, but to your energetic history. That includes the life you live now and the timelines you've forgotten. Because time, in the spiritual sense, doesn't move like a line. It doesn't obey the rules of clocks or calendars. It folds, it echoes, it repeats, and parts of you might still be caught in places you no longer remember. You may think you're living one life, but your soul might be stretched across several, still echoing within past wounds, reliving moments that your mind has long let go of. This is timeline fracturing. It's not a metaphor, it's not science fiction. It's an energetic reality for those sensitive enough to feel the pull of something they can't name. Imagine this: something terrible happens. You're overwhelmed. You can't process it all at once. And so, a fragment of your essence splits, stays behind, locked in that moment, looping the pain, unable to move forward with the rest of you. Meanwhile, the rest of you keeps going, building a life, trying to heal. But there's always something missing, a piece that didn't catch up, a tether that still feeds the past. This is more common than you think. And it's why so many people carry a sadness that seems older than they are. Sometimes you sense these lost fragments as a kind of ache, longing for something you can't name, a place that calls to you, a face in a dream that feels familiar though you've never met. These aren't delusions. They are breadcrumbs from the parts of you still waiting to come home. And until they do, they siphon energy from the now into the then, keeping you tired, divided, scattered. Other times, the repetition becomes external. You find yourself stuck in the same story, same relationship patterns, same emotional traps, same lessons playing out on loop. You've done the work, you've tried to change, and still the cycle returns. This might not be your failure. It might be the echo of another version of you, one caught in a timeline still playing the old script. These echoes aren't symbolic. They're real energy patterns bouncing across realities, impacting your current life like ripples in a pond. And just like a phantom limb can itch long after it's gone, your soul can feel the presence of parts that are no longer with you. You walk into a place and feel déjà vu, or meet someone and feel a deep connection without explanation. You're not broken. You're remembering. Your soul is signaling that pieces of it still live elsewhere, still anchored to events you don't recall, but your essence never forgot. When you begin to feel that inner tug, that sense that parts of you are missing, it's not imagination. It's a summons. A quiet invitation to go find the pieces of yourself still caught in moments your heart never got to finish. Healing, in its truest form, doesn't always come from moving on. It often begins with going back, with reclaiming what was left behind. And that reclamation isn't about reliving the pain. It's about reaching into those frozen frames of your timeline and gathering the energy that stayed behind so it can finally come home. The process of calling yourself back doesn't happen by thinking harder. It doesn't happen with logic or reason. It begins with presence, a quieting of the noise, a stepping out of linear time and into the soft field where memory and energy coexist. In this space, you don't need to remember everything perfectly. You only need to feel where your essence is missing. The body will tell you. The heart will whisper. Your dreams may guide the way. And from that space, you call. Gently, steadily, you reach out to the part of you that froze during heartbreak, that collapsed during betrayal, that hid during fear. You tell it. You are safe to return. You are wanted. You are me. Visualizing this return can be powerful. Picture the version of yourself still stuck in that old chapter. See their eyes, their posture, their pain, and then, instead of fixing them, embrace them. Imagine pulling them into your heart with a tenderness that says, I remember you. I never abandoned you. I just didn't know where you'd gone. And in that moment, the split begins to heal. The tether transforms. No longer a leak. It becomes a bridge through which vitality flows back into you, not as weakness, but as power reclaimed. But fragments aren't the only thing weighing your energy down. Many of us are still bound to promises that no longer make sense. Some we made ourselves, others were made on our behalf in moments of vulnerability or desperation. Either way, they operate like unseen contracts, binding the soul to terms it no longer consents to. These spiritual agreements can take many forms: a vow to carry someone else's pain, a promise to remain small so another can shine, a silent oath of self-sacrifice in exchange for belonging. The worst part is, these contracts rarely expire on their own. They stay active until you consciously dissolve them. Breaking those ties isn't betrayal, it's liberation. It starts with recognition, feeling into areas of your life where you constantly give but never feel replenished, where your efforts feel demanded rather than chosen. These are often signs of outdated agreements, still draining your will. When you notice them, you don't need to fight. You simply stand in your center and speak your sovereignty. Aloud, in meditation, or in writing, declare, "Any spiritual contract, promise, or bond that no longer serves my highest well-being is now null and void. I am no longer bound to what I did not consciously choose. I reclaim my energy. I restore my freedom." There is immense power in that kind of clarity. When you speak it from your core, energy begins to shift. The channels that once siphoned your spirit start to close. The noise that once cluttered your field starts to quiet. You begin to feel a little more whole, a little more like yourself, not because something external changed, but because you changed your spiritual terms of engagement. But sometimes words aren't enough. Sometimes the energy tied to a person or a memory feels like a physical cord stretching from your heart or solar plexus to something far outside you. These are energetic threads, and they do not dissolve until you cut them, intentionally, compassionately, and with a full heart. Cord cutting is not about hate or vengeance. It's not about denying the connection ever existed. It's about acknowledging that the bond is no longer healthy, that your energy must be returned to you. In practice, cord cutting can be a deeply sacred ritual. In a state of calm awareness, imagine the connection you want to release. See the cord for what it is, a strand of shared energy that once served a purpose but has now become a weight. Visualize yourself gently but firmly severing it. You might see it as a golden thread snapping or a rope dissolving in light. You can call upon your own inner strength or ask for guidance from your highest self to make the cut. And once it's done, imagine your energy field sealing shut, glowing with your essence alone, clear, intact, untouchable. This act of spiritual hygiene is not a one-time event. Just as we shower and brush our teeth daily, so too must we tend to our unseen body. Energy cords form quickly, especially with those we interact with regularly. But over time, with conscious maintenance, your field becomes cleaner, brighter, less susceptible to entanglement. And that, in turn, frees up immense amounts of energy that were previously locked in emotional contracts and unresolved ties. Even deeper than retrieval or cutting is the concept of returning to the 0 point, the field of total presence. This is the place where the past cannot reach and the future holds no sway. It is the still center of the soul, where all timelines converge and the noise of fragmentation dissolves. In this space, you're not seeking or repairing, you're simply being. And that beingness is the most powerful magnet for scattered energy there is. Getting there requires stillness, not the absence of sound, but the quieting of internal chatter. Breath is the key. Drop into your body. Let your awareness rest behind your ribs, around the space of the heart. Feel each inhale as a wave drawing you inward, each exhale as a soft release of everything not needed, and then imagine your energy, all versions of you, across all timelines, drifting back toward this now. not with force, with invitation. You become the center of gravity, the unshakable axis, and slowly, thread by thread, your essence weaves itself into wholeness. What makes the 0 point powerful is that it is not built on emotion or memory. It is beyond story. It is simply you, untouched, unbroken, unwavering. The more you visit this space, the stronger its magnetism becomes, and with each return, you anchor more of your scattered vitality. You stop leaking into what was. You stop grasping for what might be. You become the ground beneath your own feet. And yet, once reclaimed, that energy must be protected. The soul is not a fortress, but it does need boundaries. The energetic field that surrounds your body is not decorative. It is your first line of defense, your soft armor. And like any protective layer, it can become worn down. Holes can form, shadows can slip in. That's why it's essential to strengthen it, just as you would a muscle. This strengthening doesn't require elaborate rituals. It begins with daily practices that center and ground you. Walking barefoot on soil or stone, sitting beneath sunlight and letting it touch your skin with warmth, breathing deeply, consciously, feeling your body as a living vessel of spirit, visualizing a cocoon of light, whatever color feels safe, wrapping around you, not to isolate you, but to insulate you from intrusion. These small acts send a message to your subconscious. I am worth protecting. Cleansing your field matters just as much as fortifying it. Like dust on a mirror, psychic residue can blur your clarity. Salt baths, sound healing, sacred smoke, and even silence can act as energetic resets. You don't need to be spiritually advanced to clear your space. You only need to care enough to make time. A simple bowl of salt water, a bell, a few minutes of stillness while holding the intention to release. These are powerful tools, not because they're flashy, but because they are focused. And focus is energy given direction. As your field strengthens, something else begins to awaken. Your spiritual sovereignty. Not dominance, not superiority, but the unshakable recognition that you and you alone are the rightful steward of your energy. Sovereignty means no one gets to decide for you where your essence flows. No outdated promise, no unseen being, no manipulative relationship. You are the ruler of your internal kingdom. Cultivating this sovereignty is less about control and more about clarity. Daily affirmations help. Not the kind that beg for change, but the kind that declare truth. I own my energy. My soul is mine to command. No force has permission to occupy my field. Speak these with conviction. Let your cells believe them. Over time, these words create a firewall, one that doesn't rely on fear, but on self-trust. Parasitic influences, toxic entanglements, even subtle manipulation lose their grip when faced with someone who knows their own power. True spiritual authority doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It simply is. It walks into a room and shifts the air. It faces temptation and feels no need to engage. It is quiet but undeniable. And when you wear that kind of presence, not as armor but as truth, the world responds differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. And yet the most potent weapon you have in this invisible battle is also the most gentle: awareness. To observe yourself without judgment. To track your emotional shifts without panic. To notice when your energy dips and ask, what did I just give away? And this practice of self-witnessing doesn't require any special gift. It simply asks you to stay present with yourself. To be curious, not critical. To tune in before you burn out. When you watch your own patterns with compassion, you begin to notice things others miss. A phrase that drains you. A relationship that no longer fits. An old habit that no longer soothes. And instead of reacting blindly, you respond from center. That's presence. That's power. Not flashy, but unshakable. The more you practice this awareness, the more you become your own guardian, no longer scattered by every passing emotion, no longer weakened by every demand. You become the anchor of your own field. And in that steadiness, healing accelerates, energy returns, wholeness unfolds. Once you've begun reclaiming your scattered essence, and as you stand in the center of your energetic sovereignty, a different kind of awareness begins to unfold, one that goes beyond your personal story. You start to sense that not all of your fatigue, your emotional echoes, or your psychic burdens originated with you. Some of them stretch back through bloodlines, through generations of choices, traumas, and spiritual silences that were never resolved. Some of the weight you carry is ancestral, stories whispered in your DNA, not in your ears. Ancestral energy isn't metaphorical. It's living memory encoded into your bones, passed down like invisible heirlooms. Joys, blessings, resilience, they're there too. But so are the wounds. The unresolved grief of a grandmother who died with secrets unspoken. The terror of an ancestor who faced persecution or betrayal. The vows of silence made by those who were never allowed to speak freely. All of this becomes part of the spiritual atmosphere you're born into. And if not examined and healed, these energies don't just linger. They bleed into your life like ink into water. You may feel this through inherited patterns, fears that seem to arise without cause, a tendency towards self-sabotage, or emotional triggers that feel larger than your personal experiences would justify. That's because you're not just carrying your pain, you may be echoing theirs. The sadness that clings to you in stillness may be the sadness of someone who never had the voice to mourn properly. The confusion in your relationships might trace back to a lineage of entanglements that were never released. Healing ancestral burdens doesn't require you to know every detail of your family's history. It simply asks for your willingness to be the one who stops the cycle. When you choose to recognize what's not yours, but lives within you, you become a transformer of energy, a light in the bloodline who dares to shine on what has been buried. In meditation, you might picture your lineage standing behind you, generations long, not to worship them, not to blame them, but to acknowledge their presence and their unfinished business. And from your place of strength, you say, it ends here. The silence ends with me. The pain does not pass forward. I forgive what I understand and what I don't. This act of declaration can shift lifetimes, because energy, once acknowledged, begins to move, and stagnant patterns, once met with love, start to dissolve. You do not owe your ancestors your suffering. You owe them your healing, because every time you reclaim a piece of yourself that was lost to generational fear or shame, you restore light to a line that has long been in the dark. But the complexity of fatigue and energy fragmentation doesn't stop with blood or memory. It extends into the collective consciousness. Every person lives not only within their body and story, but also within a shared emotional ecosystem. The fears of the many ripple outward. The traumas of societies leave residue. And sensitive souls, especially those who walk paths of empathy or healing, often absorb more than they realize. There is a saturation point, a moment when you can no longer tell if what you feel is yours or simply what you've absorbed. Collective grief, panic, rage, they flow through invisible channels, amplified by global events, by media, by the emotional weight of the times. And if your field is porous or your boundaries are worn thin, these collective currents can enter like smoke through cracks. You might notice this after watching too much news or scrolling endlessly through despair-filled content. The heaviness lingers even when you step away. That's because you didn't just see something painful, you energetically received it. And without a conscious practice of clearing, These collective frequencies build up like static, buzzing in the background of your spirit. Over time, they distort your intuition, blur your clarity, and weigh down your body with emotional smog. To clear collective energy, you must become intentional with your consumption, just as you would with food or water. Not everything is meant to enter your spirit. Just because you can feel it doesn't mean it's yours to carry. Set boundaries, not out of denial, but out of discernment. You are more useful to the world when you are whole than when you are collapsing under the weight of its pain. Creating rituals of release can help. After engaging with heavy content or holding space for others, imagine a wave of light washing through your system, sweeping out what isn't yours. Speak it aloud if needed. I release what is not mine. I return what belongs to the collective. I restore what belongs to me. These simple affirmations, when spoken with presence, shift your energetic field. You step back into your center. And then there's the realm even more hidden, layers of reality that most never touch consciously, interdimensional entanglement. The soul is vast, far greater than the single lifetime you perceive. Parts of your consciousness may be interacting with forces, entities, or experiences in realms that defy language, not because you've sought them out, but because existence is layered, and your awareness moves through these layers even when your mind sleeps. In some of these layers, agreements may have been made under duress, confusion, or even innocence, contracts with energies that present themselves as light but function as leeches, tethers to dimensions where time does not move, but energy is continuously extracted, portals left open during traumatic events, allowing siphoning to continue unchecked for decades. These are not fantasy. For those attuned, they are felt as strange dreams, moments of dissociation, a sense that you're being watched or drained by something not visible. If you've done all the personal healing, cut all the cords, and still feel deeply exhausted, this may be where to look. Interdimensional parasitism is subtle. It bypasses mental awareness. But the body knows. The nervous system stays activated without reason. The sleep is restless, the hunger for stillness never satisfied. The key here is not fear, it is command. These entanglements thrive on your disbelief or your terror. What disarms them is your absolute, grounded presence, standing in the recognition that your energy is your own, not just in this dimension, but across all that exist. When you claim that truth with conviction, you send a wave across all planes. It says, "This soul is sovereign. No entry without consent, no feeding permitted, no tether remains." Ceremonies of closure can be created. Light a candle, sit in silence, and call forth all energies, agreements, or entities that have interacted with your field without full conscious permission. Speak clearly, not as a victim, but as a sovereign soul. Any connection, alliance, or bond that exists across time, space, dimension, or plane without my full conscious consent is hereby dissolved. I do not serve. I do not owe. I am free. You do not need to understand every detail. The soul knows. And when you speak from your deepest truth, the frequencies align. What was bound begins to unbind. What was feeding begins to starve, and what was distorted begins to clear. But this clearing requires something else, your steady commitment. Because even after release, the patterns that allowed the entanglement can remain. Self-doubt, people-pleasing, fear of power. These are like open doors. To truly remain free, those patterns must be transformed. You must become a person who not only heals, but lives as though they are already whole. This means making different choices, choosing silence over explaining yourself, choosing solitude over energy-sucking company, choosing truth over approval, choosing to listen to the whisper inside that says, "I matter," even when the world pretends you don't. Each of these choices, small as they may seem, fortify your energy body. They teach your field how to hold shape. They anchor your aura into something that can't be breached by a passing wave of fear or manipulation. You become not just healed, but unshakable. And that's when a new kind of strength arises, one not based on how much you can endure, but on how much you no longer need to. You stop leaking energy to old dramas. You stop collapsing when others disapprove. You stop dimming to make others comfortable. You rise, not with fanfare, but with clarity. This kind of clarity doesn't come from learning more. It comes from unlearning the belief that you must remain small to be safe, that you must remain silent to be loved, that your spiritual power must always be hidden behind humility. Those beliefs may have once served you, but now they cost you more than they protect. So you let them go. You let go of the fear that if you stand in your light, something dark will strike. You let go of the belief that suffering is a prerequisite for wisdom. You let go of the need to explain your journey to those who will never see the terrain. And instead, you begin living differently. You wake with purpose, not pressure. You protect your mornings like sacred temples. You speak with intention, not as a performance. You stop giving your yes out of obligation and start saying no without guilt. These acts, over time, create an energetic architecture within you, one strong enough to withstand the storms of this world and the whispers of others. Eventually, something miraculous happens. The exhaustion that used to greet you every morning begins to lift. The heaviness in your chest starts to dissolve. The fog around your thoughts clears, not all at once, not like a magic spell, but gradually, steadily, because you've stopped leaking. You've stopped giving yourself away piece by piece. You've become the keeper of your own flame. Once your energy begins returning to you, once the leaks are sealed and the old cords dissolved, a shift happens that isn't loud, but deeply real. It's not just that the tiredness lifts or that your thoughts feel clearer. It's that you start to remember who you were before the scattering, before the compromises, before the invisible siphons. And in that remembrance you find a softness, not weakness, but a sacred quietness, a kind of still power that doesn't need validation or spectacle. You remember what it means to be whole. But wholeness isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's a daily devotion, not to perfection, but to presence, not to performance, but to truth. You begin to walk through the world differently. You don't flinch when someone questions your worth. You don't scramble to fix yourself every time discomfort arises. You stop outsourcing your inner compass to other people's opinions. You know what's yours. You know what belongs outside your gates. That clarity is hard-earned, and it is yours to keep. This embodiment, the act of living from your reclaimed soul, is where everything begins to take root. No longer just ideas, no longer just rituals, but a steady rhythm, a way of being that honors your spirit in motion. You eat with more awareness. You rest with deeper permission. You speak with less rush and more weight. Each breath becomes a declaration. I am here, I am whole, and my energy is sacred. And in this sacredness, you discover resilience, not the kind built on pushing through pain, but the kind that arises when your foundation is secure. You become less reactive, less easily knocked off center, not because the world stops testing you, but because you stop leaking every time it does. You've done the work, the stitching, the retrieval, the claiming. You are no longer walking around with open wounds hoping the world won't notice. You've sealed them, blessed them, transformed them into doorways of awareness. Even the past, once heavy and shadowed, becomes something different. it no longer traps you. It becomes reference, not residence. A story you've integrated, not a loop you're stuck in. You can revisit it without collapsing. You can speak of it without shaking. That is power. Not forgetting, but remembering without breaking. And now, with your full energy restored, you can begin creating from fullness, from joy, from sovereignty. You start choosing experiences not to fill a void, but to expand your radiance. Relationships shift, not because you demand change, but because your vibration no longer matches old entanglements. What once fed on you falls away. What once drained you can't reach you. Not because you built walls, but because you stopped leaving your door open to what never served you. Integration also means protecting this new state. Because just as energy can scatter, it can be chipped away again, slowly, quietly, by old habits or unconscious openings. This is why conscious maintenance becomes your spiritual hygiene, not in fear, but in reverence. You cleanse your field like you brush your teeth. You check in with your emotional weather like you check the forecast. You tune your internal frequency daily, like an instrument that deserves to be in harmony. And as this harmony settles in, something remarkable happens. Your intuition sharpens, not the dramatic, movie-style visions, but the subtle knowing, the quiet nudges. You start trusting the gut feeling that says, not this, or yes, go there, without needing external confirmation. You live by inner instruction, not outer noise. Even your creativity changes. With no more energy being stolen, your ideas start to flow. Inspiration returns. The desire to build, express, connect rises again. It's not forced. It's not about being productive. It's about the joy of expression returning to a vessel no longer cracked. You may find your boundaries become sharper too, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You no longer say yes because you're afraid of being seen as difficult. You no longer shrink to make others more comfortable. You stop sacrificing your peace for momentary validation, and in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, not of perfection, but of what's possible when a soul returns to itself. And yes, moments of challenge will still come. The world doesn't change just because you do. But now you meet those moments from your center. You don't lose yourself. You don't unravel. You don't trade your peace for someone else's comfort. You've earned your energy back, and you've learned how to keep it. This path isn't easy, but it is real, and it is yours. And if ever again you feel the pull of fragmentation, the creeping fog of fatigue, the strange hollowness that no amount of sleep can touch, you'll know where to look, not outside, not in someone else's answers, but within, in the silence, in the breath, in the space where your soul waits patiently, always ready to return when you call it back. Because you now know the signs, you've walked through the forgetting, you've mapped the places where your essence can hide, and you've learned how to retrieve it, to restore it, to re-embody it. You've become fluent in the language of your own light. And you also know now, nobody can do this for you, not fully. Guidance can help, tools can assist, but only you can reclaim yourself. Only you can shut the hidden doors, speak the forgotten truths, and walk back into the fullness of your own being. That is the sacred task, and now you're doing it, day by day, breath by breath. Let this be your legacy, not how much you gave away, but how completely you returned. Not how many roles you played, but how deeply you remembered yourself. Let your energy be not something that drains, but something that radiates. Let your spirit be not something that flees under pressure, but something that deepens under light. And if this journey resonated with you, if you felt your own story reflected in these words, or caught glimpses of your scattered self gathering in the spaces between them, then please let this message continue, like this video. Share it with someone who may be quietly unraveling. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel for more soul-deep guidance like this. Because the journey doesn't end here. It begins again, right now, with a deeper breathe.